If you're struggling with coloring your clothes, then here are 3 easy ways that will help you color your clothes much quicker. But first, let's start with something really crucial to coloring our clothes. So it's actually much harder to start rendering with colors straight up, and picking the right saturation, color hues, the values, and color combination can quickly overwhelm you in the beginning. And this puts our coloring on an easy mode. So we want to pick 3 values. We can pick our base color, base value, so somewhere around here. We can take a brush like this, boom, and put it here. And this would be our base color value. Then we want to pick something for shadows. And a good tip to choose the right value color for your shadows, it's basically to go between the color that you're already chosen and the darkest of the darks, around the middle, maybe a little bit higher. And you see here, if we put this, it looks like a decent value color. And then we want to also pick one for our lights, so somewhere around here perhaps. Also it can be like a middle from your color and the lightest. So basically we have these 3 values. And obviously, like the basics of shading, we want to first start with 3 values, 3 colors, so main, shadows, and light. And when we put our base values, then we can go and add some more values in between. So starting with the grayscale will not only make it easier to check your values and to see if the whole drawing works, but also will make much easier to actually color it. So if you have good values in your drawing, no matter what colors you pick, it will still look good. And if you start with colors and you will have bad values, you will see that. But if you still want to just paint with colors, what you can use is a basic value check. So basically we have our color here. And now if you press Ctrl Y, it will make the colors on your canvas actually grayscale. But first you need to set it up. I'll put a link for it so you can do it yourself. But yeah, basically whenever you're drawing, you can just press Ctrl Y and you'll see the values in your drawing. So you can think if they're good, if they're bad, and still, like the colors are still here. You can see this. If you press Ctrl Y again, the colors reappear. It will make your drawing just look better and you won't get as overwhelmed as starting with colors. And also if you want my brushes, they are for free in description, so you can check it out. And with them, you also get 30 art tips that will help you improve your art in 30 days. So now let's go to my actually favorite way to coloring your clothes, but it might feel a little bit complicated in the beginning, but trust me, it's pretty simple if you do this like once or two. Basically, we want to combine our whole drawing, our whole like layers, so base color, shadows, light, and ambient occlusion and all that stuff into one layer. And then we want to press right click, new correction layer, and go into tone curves. Here you see a window pop up. Obviously, if you use like different program, it will be called probably something else, but I started in Photoshop and it's probably in the most of the drawing programs. But yeah, basically we have here this window. Now, first, let's start with the channels. So basically here we have RGB, which is like all layers combined. Here we have separate channels for green, for red, green, and blue. The first RGB will help you play with contrast, will help you play with brightness. So basically if we move our curves, you see that it gets either darker or lighter. And basically you can place like some curves in between. Now you see that it creates like some weird stuff, because how it works is basically here are assigned value from 0 to 255. And on the left side, there are also values. So basically in the bottom value 0, you assign a 0. Now if you raise it, what it does, it basically raises the value of our base here. So you'll see it gets much lighter. So basically this is the darkest and it gets lighter the higher it goes. So basically same here. We have our 255, which is the lightest, and the lower it will go, the darker it will get. And obviously you can clip the correction layer to your just drawing and you see that it gets darker. But yeah, let's put it to what it was before. So here we can play with contrast. So you can raise our darks a little bit, so make it a little bit lower, and our lights we can also raise. Boom. Here you see that we have made the contrast a little bit more. Boom. So you can see here, but that's not the only thing that we can do with it. Now let's go to the channels. So let's say we want to make like a purple or bluish dress. So here, if we raise one channel, you see that we get more color. So here we also have our values from the darkest to the lightest. And here we in output, we have how much color we want to, I guess, give to the whole drawing. So basically if we go in the middle and we just, let's say, raise these values here, boom, like that, you see that the lightest get more redder. If we just delete that and put, I guess, darkest, boom, we see that the shadows get much redder. So let's make a blue dress. So basically we want to push one hue, okay, it's now like a purple, and we want to decrease the other channels. If all 3 channels are on the same line, like here, boom, it means that it's basically 0 and it doesn't really add color. If one is higher, it will give the more color in this actually value, okay? So if we lower this, we see that we get less and less of dot colors. Boom. So basically if we decrease like that, boom, you see that we get a lot of more blue. But we want to make a little bit blue. But also, for example, maybe we want to make a redder dress. Okay, so let's raise the red colors. Okay, boom. Now lower the blue and green. Now we see that it's more red. It's actually like a rose, a little bit more and more. But now we can actually add some blue into shadows. So if you raise the lower values here, you see that we get like more purple, more bluish shadows, and I really like this. Also we can add some green and it actually balances out. And basically what I like actually a lot in this, we can boost our shadows a little bit, and what it does is decreases the saturation and contrast in these areas and makes it like look pretty interesting. So we'll just take that and clip it to just our dress and make it green. So for example, we can push our green color here, decrease our reds, perhaps like this, and maybe put a little bit more bluish, so it makes like a cool green color. Maybe too much green, something like that. That's pretty nice color. Okay, and maybe we can also put some blue in our darks, in our shadows. So for example, something like this. And also like maybe push our highlights a little bit like this. Boom. Obviously you see that you can make a lot of cool color combinations. You see here that we have like bluer dress with greener shadows. So we can go into green now, maybe even do something like that. You see, it's kind of cooked. It's kind of like overdid it, but I really like this. And we can also go to our values and see it. But yeah, so here would be like a red, boom, or this. We can actually combine these two and get like an obsidian from Minecraft. You see that you can make a lot of interesting stuff. And then you can just go and erase some parts. It's really interesting and it's really cool. You can do a lot of things. You can obviously combine, as I said before. But yeah, I really like this method, and you don't have to use this only for clothes. You can use that for skin, for like cool materials, for like probably everything that you want. And here is a study that I did of Sakimi-chan. So let me show you that you can pretty much copy this and use it for whatever you want. So here you see a cooked version, and you see that just a couple of clicks and you have a really nicely colored drawing. So basically maybe we can. So now let's just go to the next way. So these are pretty basic gradient maps. So you make a new correction layer, you choose gradient maps, and you see here there's a new window that pops up. And what you can do here is basically you have this slider of values. So from darkest to the lightest. Here are some that were already made. Delete that. I just cancel that, make a new, boom, gradient maps. But yeah, this is basically easier to understand, but I still prefer the previous method, though it's still good. So here, as I said before, you have these values here. So darkest and the lightest. Basically you can assign to each value here a different color. For example, here you can assign like a redder color. Boom. Now, for example, we can do something like this. This looks pretty cool. So basically you can go here and change it to like a really dark red, something like perhaps this. Change the slider a little bit, put it here. Maybe you can raise the light values. Boom. You can add maybe another color, whatever you want it to be. Maybe a little bit lighter, maybe bluer. You can obviously move these curves a little bit. So let's maybe make a different one. So let's take this color, make like a really dark blue, something like this. Put it to the darker values here. We want to place like a bluer more to this. Okay, boom. Obviously you can change these transitions between values. Okay, you see here are different. Okay, let's just whatever, leave it here. But still, if you move these curves, you'll assign a different value color to these values. Boom. You see here that you have a lot of things that you can do. Okay, maybe we can actually make it even darker here. So add some ambient occlusion. Obviously, the closer you put these colors to each other, the harder the transition between them will be. There will be like a pretty hard one. Okay, so obviously the further apart you put them, the smoother the transition will be. You can even reverse it, so you see that it's now opposite to what it was before. But yeah, you can probably even make this much lighter. Obviously here you don't really have that much control over the contrast. That's why I prefer the previous one. But still, like a couple of clicks and you have a basically pretty nicely colored clothes. You see that it's super simple, and you can just add some things on top. But yeah, it also lets you like add a different hue color like different values. So you can pretty much, if you know the exact value of the bounce light on your character, you can change the color of it. Here we can change this, maybe like something like that, boom, and we have some bounce light. Pretty interesting. It's pretty cool and super easy. Like anyone can do it. So this method is actually better for beginners than the previous one because it's much easier. You just add some colors, okay? In the previous one, you have a little bit more control of the contrast, of the brightness and stuff. But here you just put some colors for the value that you want, okay? So for shadows, for light, for bounce light, and it's pretty simple, straightforward. But now let me show you the last way that you can add colors. Here, this one is a little bit more manual. Here you just need to basically do all that with your hands. So here you still want to combine all the layers and make a new layer on top. So let's make a new color layer. Clip it to this so we won't go outside. And here just pick one color and paint it. Boom. You can do just that. And you see you have already colored your drawing. But obviously that's not what we want. So here basically just pick an airbrush or whatever brush you want. And what this layer does is basically just puts a color on your drawing, and this uses these values. So for example, if this is lighter, then this red here will be lighter. It sits on top. So obviously you can do a couple of colors. So for example, we can do something like that. Boom. See that you have different colors. Basically, the more left you push, the less saturated the color will be. Boom. And the more right you push it, the more saturated the color will be. But also the higher the lighter and the lower the darker. So basically in the middle would be something like that. This is pretty much more trickier because here you can just lay like basically colors, but here we want to also add different layers. So for example, we can put a hue. Hue layer basically doesn't really look at what saturation or what brightness of the color you have value. It just takes the color that you have of the hue. So for example, here you see that now it started to create like weird artifacts here. So I saw that this happened in Clip Studio. In Photoshop, I don't really get it, but still you can see that you just place the hue color here. We can also use a saturation. So basically we had this red layer below, and if we add some saturation, we'll get like more saturated. You see here, less saturated. Pretty simple. So basically here you just go and paint the colors that you want on top, but still you have your values figured out, so you don't really have to stress about anything. We just now stress about saturations and stuff, and here you can see that it creates this weird artifacts here. Pretty cool. So this method is a little bit more advanced, and you need some like experience with colors to be able to put like a nice looking colors with the right, you know, saturations and stuff. And obviously these methods are not limited to only clothes. You can still like put this for hair, for skin, for whatever you want. Also, you can check out my new tutorial on how to draw basic bodies on Patreon. And also next week there will be one for drawing and rendering clothes, so you can check it out. Just to summarize everything now. So basically you want to start with a simple grayscale painting. It will make just drawing much easier. You won't be as overwhelmed as you would with the colors. So basically you just pick 3 values and you just put them for the shadows, for base color and for light. Then you want to combine these layers into one, and then you can just pick one of these 3 methods of coloring. So you can either pick curves, gradient maps, or just layers. At the end you can just go and adjust it with adding some random colors, not random, like bounce light, like more light and stuff. Yeah, it's pretty simple, but to be honest, the most important thing to actually go to that stage is to be able to draw clothes. And this video here will help you actually draw these basic clothes, so you can check it out. Bye.